When a detective puts pen to paper and really looks into something really deeply, they can see the underlying issues going on. They can see what is below the surface of what is not avidly for the faint of heart. They can really easily see, okay, this pattern is not working out for us, so we have to change this. Or this note is not written in the right way, so it has to be rearranged. So, in this way, what we have going on May 5th, 2026, is an exact square between Mercury and Pluto. This square, and I'm going to talk about the collective reading interpretation in this episode. The next episode, tomorrow's episode, I'm going to break it down through the 12 signs. But today I'm going to talk about what it means collectively. So this particular square between Mercury and Pluto, Mercury in Taurus, Pluto in Aquarius at 5 degrees, they're squaring each other exact. So Pluto entered Aquarius November 19th, 2024, and it is in the sign for the next 20 years until 2044, and it is really shaking up a lot of things, and I'm going to just sort of summarize that here in this episode, in this video. But it really comes down to Mercury in Taurus, which Mercury entered Taurus, and I'll be having my Mercury return here pretty soon. I'm doing this April 30th. This is when I'm doing this video. So, April 30th, pretty soon after, May 2nd or 3rd, Mercury is going to enter Taurus. So, when they are both at 5 degrees, they will be 90 degrees across from each other in a square. And squares are hard aspects. But here's the gift of squares. They put us into action. They put things into motion. It's like the the ball that gets rolling. A ball that gets rolling is only rolls because something else put it into motion. Like squares sort of is that force that just that gets the ball rolling, that gets us to act. Because if we are just so attuned to what is going wrong, then we're easily going to then see, okay, this is wrong, and it takes some willpower and some willingness to change that. And so this is what squares give us, is the willpower. So this square between Mercury, the planet of communication and thought and mind and thinking process, and Pluto, which is, really looking at, what is deep and below the surface. What is the underlying issue that has to be brought up so that we can look at it, so that we can transform it. Because that's what Pluto wants to do, is, bring up the shadow material in order for us to transform all of this, in order for us to release this. And sometimes it involves facing what we are uncomfortable with. So it's very important, and it's going to be kind of a theme that's going to run through a majority of the signs that I may get to tomorrow, with all of this information and how it would translate to your sign. So, this particular aspect is going to bring about a lot of deep thinking. We're thinking very deeply about something. We're thinking very insightfully. We're thinking in a very profound way about things. However dark and probing this thinking is. We are investigating, why things are the way they are. Really asking ourselves, why is this way? Why is that way? Why, asking these very deep questions in order to gain some deep, meaningful answers. So, that's when it comes down to probing. That's kind of basically what probing is. And so probing is where we are kind of like the detective. We are the investigator. We're exploring certain thoughts and feelings to reveal what's in the shadows, basically. And that's what we're doing with probing. Like Mercury and Scorpio is deeply probing because they want to get to the bottom of things. Like probing is getting to the bottom of something. So when it comes to probing, we really have to look at this in the context of this aspect. This can bring about a lot of harsh words. A lot of very, very harsh, very, very direct and very, very intense words. This is what this aspect can bring about. So we really need to be mindful of our words at this time, that they're not too forceful, or they're not too harsh or too mean or too cruel or too cutting, that they are just hurting others, and we are having so much power over ourselves, and we are very egoic, and we're not, really speaking from a place of truth that's also calm and grounded. So that's what we need to sort of keep in mind with this, is that we're not, our words are not too dark and, too short and sharp. Where they're very, very impulsive, where they're very, very reactive, because we can easily be very, very reactive in, that kind of way during this time. There could be a lot of people that are likely to have a lot of willpower that we could see playing out, globally, mundanely, or just you could be feeling like you have just a lot of willpower at this time. Like just invites you to have a lot of willpower in your speech, like to really, really be strong and confident and pierce through any lie and deceit and deception and anything that's fading off in the distance, any white fade, any mist fade, anything that is unclear and indirect. Now it's time to pierce right on through that. And it's time to get your mode of communication out there and say, you know what? This is what I have to say, and this is my truth. And I am really, really being strong within myself about this truth. So, having the willpower. And then you could be very, very, find that you're just very, very intense in your ideas. And when you are intense in a way that hurts others, that hurts relationships, that's where, you sort of have to pull it back and, look at how is my intensity with my ideas and how I'm communicating actually hurting and hindering my relationships with the other people in my life. And, and what they want to express. So, so knowing what you want to express, being very, very intentional, like this is what I want to express, and this is what I want to come directly from me about this. This is what's coming from a place of deep truth and inner knowing. So all the buried secrets that you have going on with yourself psychologically, or all the buried secrets, mentally, emotionally, physically going out in the world, which could be things like the money got thrown in the bank, or the food didn't get cropped, or the weather didn't get veined, or or this person has this really, really dark secret that they're not revealing. Secrets of the rich and powerful. It could be secrets in your own personal life. Like any secret at all could become, could easily be illuminated for you now, because Pluto illuminates what is in the shadows. And so this is illuminated and revealed to you, and it's looked at with scrutiny. You're looking at all these kind of things, at all these, issues and all these things below the surface with scrutiny. It's very, very important to pay a lot of attention to looking at it in a very, very deep way, into seeing something, with analyzing it, with, thinking about it very, very carefully, with, with looking at the details of it, as opposed to just, big picture thinking. So then, like it's a balance between those things. So Mercury in Taurus, as a placement, wants to keep things stable, wants to keep things calm and steady, because Mercury is, communication, and we want our words and thought to be very, very grounded, to be very, very, like we're communicating from a calm and loving place, as opposed to, something, reactive, or something, highly charged and emotional. And Mercury in Taurus is very, very steady with its, communication, and how it, goes about, not from Canada or Michigan or those types of places, goes about steadiness and, stability here. So, Mercury in Taurus wants that, wants the steadiness of communication. Mercury in Taurus communicates in a really, really steady way. Like, I have Mercury in Taurus, and I think that, you'll find my communication can be easily, even keeled. And that, well, I mean, I have Gemini, and I have, a lot of other energies in my chart that kind of make up for that. But anyway, that's Mercury in Taurus communication. Then Pluto in Aquarius is responsible for shifting up the fabric of society, shifting up the way that we function in society, the way that we operate in society, the sort of modes of communication, the modes of, going about in society, the referendum of society. Where you're shifting up all these kind of things really, really easily. And Pluto in Aquarius is not top down like Pluto in Capricorn. It's more horizontal, like building, looking at like building community oriented situations, and places, and issues and types of things like that. So Pluto in Aquarius wants to build something sustainable that is equitable for everyone. Pluto in Aquarius cares about the all and the masses, and Pluto in Aquarius is all about what is horizontal, what is even for all, what is fair for all and just for all. So the intensity on the way that you will probably think, and the way that you write, or the way that you communicate, is amped up. The volume knob is turned up. Where you could find that in your communication, So and in your perception of reality, and your thought process. So words can also start shifting things around. Words can start changing, how we see reality. Certain people may say things that may be like, oh wow, this piece of information is not what I'm used to hearing, and this is a new piece of information. Oh, that's interesting. Well, if we can approach new ideas and new ways of thinking about things, and new ideas, not as like when people present new ideas to us, it's not an attack. It is merely them just sharing their opinion, them just sharing their ideas with us. So it's very, very important to look at how the things that we say, or the things that we hear, and allowing for that to change us, allowing for that to shift things within us, going on mentally, emotionally, psychologically. Maybe it's a pattern that we are shifting. Maybe it's a way of being, a way of thinking about something, a way of doing something that we are saying, wow, this piece of information made me aware of this and enlightened me about this, and I'm allowing it to change sort of how I go about doing this, like how I go about thinking about this and approaching this in this kind of way. So words could also change the old stuck, because Mercury and Taurus can at worst get stuck in ruts, and it can be very, very unopen to new ideas at worst. So we really, really need to be mindful of the tendency to be stuck in the old thought patterns and the old ideas, clinging to these things, but they're outdated, they're stale, they need to be updated, they need to be transformed. They need to be looked at with careful scrutiny and looked at again to make something better for the future. So these words could have a lot of, we could have a lot of, new thoughts and ideas with these particular, words. They could bring about, a lot of thoughts and ideas to our table. that we didn't have before, that like change. Oh, we're thinking about this in a totally new way. We have this brand new idea based off this piece of information that we're receiving that we previously did not have before. And then, we could find with this that, new discoveries that come about. Like new, discoveries of information. Like in general, new information could change the way that we view the world, could change the way that we think about gas, electricity, trees, light, animal welfare, human issues, change the framework of our thoughts. Now, Pluto in Aquarius deals with ideologies. So I'm going to define what an ideology is. An ideology is basically a set of, this is what it says from Google. So this is, me sort of being humble and knowing that I just want to explain and sort of go off of what it's saying here to have my own ideas about this. Like it's about, beliefs. And it deals with values, and it deals with, values are your beliefs that shape, your actions and, your decisions and what you value, what matters to you in your life. And so then ideas that shape, and, the thing is, it is more collective. That's what I want to differentiate it. Like I'm going to talk about this. How it's both individuals, like you have your own personal ideologies, and groups and societies and countries or whatever have their own ideologies that that they form, that they put into practice and they put into motion with what they're coming up with in their mind, and how they interpret these things and act on them. So it's having them and then acting on them. It's sort of a two-way street here. So, now, it looks at, more of a, like Aquarius, you have to understand, is about the individual, but it is for the group, for the collective, for the all, for the highest good of the all. It is for the masses. Like, what am I doing? What I believe that could impact others around me and could impact, the masses and the, what can I do in my small world that can impact others, in a positive way, in a very, very revolutionary way. Like, what can I do that's, innovating, what there is already that could get changed, for the better. So, looks at the group, the institution, not just the individual alone. So that's what we have to keep in mind. And we also need to remember that we need to let go of certainty of information. That's also what comes to play here. Whatever you are certain about, whatever you think that that you're so confident and sure of yourself. You're so confident that like I know this. I'm so confident that I know what I'm talking about with this. So, you may get on your high horse and think that I'm so powerful and I'm so mighty and I just know all. And that dynamic is very, very unhealthy to live with, because we are resistant to new ideas. We are self-righteous. We are this. We are that. So, whatever you are just so sure about, well, it's time to, be open to any new idea that come about. Whatever area of your life, sort of comes up against new information. Like you're going along in a certain area of life, and the new information crops up that you were previously aware of. Like you're going along, living your, daily life, average, life, and then what happens is, this new piece of information that comes in, like, oh wow, I didn't expect that. That's interesting and that's new. And the more we can be curious to this, the better off that we can truly be with it. And this information may just change the game, like allow it to change the game. It may change how we think and view the world. And it is about allowing new information to do that. And Taurus isn't the most open to new information. So Taurus, Aquarius is, fixed in its principles, but at best it can be open to anyone's perspective. So let's not get caught up in the low road of, Aquarius, which is like I'm holding on to my principles and my fixed beliefs, and they're the best and they're the most superior, and I'm harshly putting down others' beliefs because they're not intelligent enough as my beliefs. Like that superiority mindset is what Aquarius can, Aquarius can get itself, Aquarius can get caught in that. So, pieces of information come to the surface at this time. That we were not previously, aware of these pieces of information. New information comes to the surface around about, May 5th, which is Tuesday this week. So, any conversation that you have been avoiding having with anyone about any serious matter of your life, all of these thoughts, communications, opinions, and beliefs, if you have been holding them down, if you've been repressing them, and not addressing these things, they may very well come up for you to be aware of them and have your awareness of them. Like they may come up for you to look at them, like honestly, and say that, being aware of all these things and choosing to face all these things head on and choosing to come to terms with it and make peace with it. So conversations that you've been avoiding having, what have you put off talking about? Like in a relationship, if you put off talking about an issue of setting healthy boundaries, or if the one person needs to pull their weight, or if there's not enough emotional loving connection in the relationship, like any conversation or with anybody really that you've been avoiding having could be brought to your attention so that you can ultimately deal with the conversation. You can ultimately face that conversation head on. And when you do that, you'll find that when you do this, you'll be doing it in a very, very focused way where you're very, very fixed and willful and very, very dedicated to go into this conversation with a willingness to address it, with a willingness to face it, and with a willingness to, really be honest about it and not sugarcoat it and not, beat around the bush about it. So, certain messages will probably get sent between people and probably to you, or you will be probably sending these messages. And these messages are likely to be very, very deep messages. Very, very rich messages, not surface level. Profound questions that could get asked and thrown around in order for you to answer to them. These messages are coming at you for you to be able to pick up the phone and answer to all these things. Don't just withdraw and retreat and hold in just I'm going in my own little world and I'm ignoring what is going on outside of me. I am really, and I'm going to say this, and this is going to completely trump what I said in last night's Real Me podcast, but if you will just bear with me on this, permission. I think that when we are, in our own little world and we're not answering conversations, and we're not having basic common courtesy, and we're not, answering to conversations going on, and I want to say this in a gentle, loving way, not an abrupt way, knowing that there is more to life than what is suction cupped onto the end of our noses, knowing there's more to life than what our small little world can offer us. And so can we answer to others? Can we let them know, like, okay, we're not, so focused on ourselves that we are, ignoring what's going on, around us in our lives. Like, we're not in a coffin or a bubble that we are, ignoring what's going on. And we are asking, these profound questions in order to answer to them. These things are getting asked for you, and these messages are sort of coming up. Like, it's okay to, say what I am saying in terms of, knowing that there's more to the world than, that your window to the world isn't the only one. And it does take, humility and the willingness to see that very, very clearly. So, looking into and finding the truth with this. Looking into these messages and what they're really saying, and then finding what's really true about them. So then, we can also look at practical certainty with this. Practical certainty, and there's, and I want to address this because there's nothing wrong with focusing on yourself. But if you're so caught up in yourself that you are completely oblivious to the world around you, then that, I don't think is very, very healthy, and that is not healthy. So that's all I'm saying here. But you can absolutely follow your soul's calling, and I'm not, diminishing that, or I'm not, putting that down or dismissing that at all in this. So practical certainty, comes into play here. With what is going on, and governments could be very, very, could be very, very, open in their delivery of information to the people. Like, we do not want governments to hold anything in the shadows, keep anything in the shadows. We want governments to share what they need to share openly and honestly, and let the public know what is going on with them in their state of being, in their, state of peace and mind, what is, going on in the governmental structure, what's actually occurring. So, we want these governments to be very, very, transparent, very, very, telling us, how it is, and disclosing things and not withholding certain pieces of information that the public does deserve to know about. Like, we all deserve to know about it. And yeah, so not leaving those things behind closed doors, basically. So we also need to look at any fixed system going on in society that, that you don't see really. I mean, if it's not changing for the better, then we have to change it. Then we have to easily go in and alter it around. So, if you don't see these systems changing for the better, then we have to do something about it. We have to change up the system. We have to change up the structure to make it more, more ethical and more, right for the people. Like, we have to, power to the people. We have to make it right and, good, for the people, in general. So, so changing these things up for the better, or maybe this could also be, looking at, what systems are actually for the good of all. What systems are, actually, for the good of all, that are actually in place right now. Like, what systems are showing, that they are thinking of the good of all, and thinking of the greater good, thinking of the masses, but you're just not aware of these systems. You're so caught up in, the world is doomed, and, we're all, and the government's failing us, and the government's not looking after our children's needs, or our money, or healthcare, or whatever issue going on, climate change or whatever, and we think that nobody's doing anything to solve the issues. Well, open your eyes and be willing to see, like, maybe there is a government that is willing to solve these issues. It's about being willing to look at it openly and being able to recognize and validate for ourselves, okay, there are governments that are more horizontal, that are more, for the good of all. So that's what we need to keep in mind. And so another thing, is looking at the conversations that are going on around you in your life. What are these conversations occurring around you? Looking at those kind of things like that very, very easily. And if there's any conversations that you haven't give a willing ear to listen to, then this is the time to really, really listen in to those conversations. Because the truth is, you are truly worthy, and you are at the stage now where you can easily listen to the conversations going on. So listen to the conversations playing out. Listen to what is actually being said, hear it, and take it in, and then respond to it from in a very, very, aware, honest place. And, the question is, are you truly ready to hear them? Do you feel truly ready to hear these conversations? Well, like I said, that you may be ready, but do you feel like you're ready? If you're not, how can you just soften into the heart and soften into just open-mindedness to be just willing to hear what others are saying? Now, with this aspect, the downside of this is, obsessing over things. That's what we can fall into. As much as we like to dig deep and investigate, we can also, very easily obsess about things going on. Like really, really be so intense and trying to get to the bottom of it and trying to find all the answers of it and trying to, dig up all the secrets and finding all the stuff going on, here and there, that we're not, calming down the intensity and being gentle and being calm and being, serene about it. But we are obsessing over these things. We are, that's what we can do. Now, you may find that identifying truth of what is going on and integrating that truth, like making it whole and really accepting it and coming to terms with that truth, is easier. And sometime I'll do videos on all these spiritual principles that I do discuss to really, really get into here's what these things actually mean, because I hear myself say all these terms. It's like, okay, that's great, but what does it actually mean? What do you mean by all this? Well, I want to do videos on that. I want to do a video on the ego and the soul. I want to do a video on self-awareness. I want to do, there's all these ideas that I will not rush myself or kill myself or burn myself out trying to do these ideas, because then it won't be fun anymore for me. So, identifying truth, integrating the truth, and look at any, is there any conversations that need to be had around issues like family? Like, is there any conversations with family members that need to be had? Any family issues that need to be talked about? Like a home not renovating. It could be family issues, family relationship issues. Maybe somebody's in the hospital, somebody needs to change their living situation, or tradition needs to get played, or a gathering that has to get sorted out, something like that. Like family issues dealing with the home, and issues dealing with financial and grounded, stable security are very, very valuable to have now. So, it's great to have those conversations at this time. It's also great to get the thing said. Say the thing. Being willing to, speak to whatever is going on in our own lives. Speaking to it, like being willing to say something about it, and speaking to it very, very intentionally. We have to be, very, very intentional and deliberate in our words, because that's Mercury and Taurus energy. So, this is about, being very, very, intentional with, our words and what's coming out of our mouths. And, being very intentional with what we were saying. We may say something with, saying it with a lot of power. I really, really, really being in our power with what we're saying. Being in our power. Saying something from a place of confidence and truth and power, like knowing what we're talking about, like piercing through the lies and deception, speaking to something very, very truly, very, very potently, not being afraid to just share the truth, because not being afraid to just share what's going on truthfully, what is actually going on, like not sugarcoating it, but actually speaking to it, and I'm speaking to it with a lot of depth, speaking deeply about it. So we need to look into a piece of information deep enough. Really, really sitting with the piece of information. Not just, I'm just so uncomfortable with this piece of information. I'm just so unsettled with this piece of information. I don't want to associate with this piece of information. This piece of information is, not right. Unethical. Too shadow content oriented. Too under the surface, too niche, too taboo, and so we're just ignoring the piece of information that we have to look at, and we have to acknowledge, okay, this is going on, and really, really looking at this very, very critically, and instead of brushing it under the carpet. Like this is not about brushing pieces of information under the carpet, or enemizing the pieces of information, making it thine enemy or thy enemy. So let's not make it thy enemy. Let's face the information for what it is, what is actually going on. Let's see it for, what it is. Honestly and truthfully. And, let's just see it with neutrality. Instead of being an emotional bias or in a feeling bias of it, let's just notice it. Just notice it. Notice the piece of information, observe it, and inquire into it. Dig deep. Look into it further, like investigate, gain answers, do the research, do all these things. Like be willing to face it instead of brush it under the carpet. So then, this is going to be hard for you at this time, and not everybody is going to be willing to do what I'm going to be saying here. And I will tell you that the readings tomorrow will be kind of, may touch some nerves tomorrow, and may be in a way where they are sort of pushing you to actually make a change. Because this is a square, and the squares are that kind of aspect. So, but I'm saying, like, this is a tendency that I think that is very, very important for me to be aware of. Because the truth is, true wisdom is not thing that you know all. Like, don't be so high and mighty and self-righteous in your own ideas. Like, be willing to challenge your own ideas. Like, that's what the Sagittarius South Node, Gemini North Node is leaning into. Is challenging their own ideas. Challenging their own, visions and their own, beliefs and ideologies that they have, with not being so stuck in, an unbending and uncompromising with those ideas that they're still like, this is my truth and this is my belief and, this is how it is and darn it, I'm sticking to it, I'm not changing it. This is being open to just be curious and just think about things differently. Think about, be willing to think about, the world differently. challenge these, ideas. Think in, different terms about things. When it comes to, asking questions in your mind and then seeking answers to those questions. And maybe, ideas that you've had about things or opinions that you've had about things. Now you're questioning those and now you're challenging those. Now you're coming up with, new conclusions based off of the research and based off of the, the investigating that you're doing and the learning that you're doing. Keeping an open mind is so important during this time. Being open-minded, being willing to take the deep dive, being willing to research, expanding your mind. That's what, Gemini Sag is the learning axis in astrology, and Aquarius is very much about, expanding your mind and new ideas. And Taurus, Taurus can be pretty stubborn and rigid in its thinking that, I have this idea and I'm fixed to it. And Taurus can be pretty stubborn over, ideas or ways of doing things or over material possessions. It is, and hear me when I say this, the most stubborn sign. The most stubborn sign. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. But all the fixed signs really carry this stubborn quality to them. And so, I will argue that even Sagittarius can have a stubborn, self-righteous quality because it's just so confident in its ideas and it's, unwilling to bend, in those ideas. So, it's about questioning your narrative, being willing to question how you think about things, how you view things, what your ideas are, over things in life. And and questioning the narrative. Like I know some homeschool channel on YouTube does all these videos where she questions the narrative, and while her ideas are kind of out there and a little bit not basing it off of fact, really, which I do have to be critical over that. She's very, very curious about like the whole idea of like not taking what you are seeing at face value, going deeper, investigating it, looking into it further and finding what's going on. Like, be willing to question the narrative and don't take what you're seeing, carefully. And I mean, some things are just fact, and some things, you can't really question because like the earth is round or volcanoes or this or those things. Like some things are fact, but if it's like an opinion-based thing, if it's like a subjective thing with an emotional charge to it, with like feelings to it, with like a belief into it, then that is worth questioning. If it's somebody's opinion or if it's a certain truth that is subjective in a kind of way. So questioning the narrative can deepen the understanding of yourself. Can deeply understand your narrative and come to different conclusions about yourself, and you learn about like, oh, now I have different beliefs, now I have opinions because I was open enough and willing enough to learn and willing enough to receive new information and understanding yourself and transforming the way that you think. Like if you are like like Mercury and Taurus is coming to square Pluto and Aquarius. Pluto and Aquarius is saying to Taurus, hey, if you're thinking rigidly, if you're thinking stubbornly, if you're being so fixed in your ideas, like be willing to open up to new ideas, be willing to change. Like it's not making your ideas any bad, not putting them down. But if that's the only ideas that you have and you think those are the only ideas, that's not accurate because there is more than one, person in the world. There's more than one belief system. Your ideas are not the only ideas. Your window to the world is not the only one. So, understanding that and being willing to change, up how you think is very, very important. So that is all that I have to say on Mercury square Pluto at 5 degrees of Aquarius and Taurus. I want you to tune in for the the 12 sign reading video tomorrow, where I will discuss how this transit can impact all 12 signs, your sun, moon, and rising sun. So tune in for that coming up tomorrow. So anyway, bye for now, everybody. See you in the next episode of the Cosmic Sky podcast.